You don't have to tell me. I mean, I already know. I feel like it's been forever since I've done one of these doggone videos, and it really has been quite a while. But it's not entirely my fault. I want to just start this whole video out by telling you I had completely different plans for what I was going to be doing this week. I actually made a video for this class at the normal time on Tuesday. To tell you the truth, I had made it on the early side. See, what I did was over the last week I got me one of these. This is a Microsoft Surface Pro. And I was really excited about it because, as you know, or may not know, it runs off of a Microsoft Windows operating system, which is what the software that I use to make these fine videos that I give to you. I use a product called Minicam, and Minicam would work with my Surface. So I was real excited about it. But as luck would have it, when I installed Minicam to the Surface, for whatever reason, it did not let me know that the audio driver was conked out, and I actually made a 45-minute video or so, and no audio came over whatsoever. How terrible is that? That's actually the second time that's happened, so maybe that speaks to the viability of the software Minicam, because as handy as it is, this is actually the second time this term I've had a failure on it, so feeling a little bit crunchy about that. Anyway, what I was planning to do, I mean, I was look at this, man. I mean, I was gonna be this guy right here. I mean, this is the doggone Microsoft Surface. This guy's like typing, doing all his work, probably doing some cool video chats on it, like I'm doing with you fine folks. This was me. I mean, what else have we got? This is the Microsoft website, by the way. And yeah, this guy, he had his doggone headphones around his neck, like I often have when I'm doing heavy duty work. I got a hoodie on, kind of like your boy right here. I'm doing stuff like this all the time, and you know, this is kind of relatable to me. For the most part, I shouldn't bag on the Surface Pro 6, because I got to tell you, if you want a really functional work ready tablet computer that will do a lot of your stuff, like you know, have that cool. Look at this lovely Alcantara keyboard right here. I mean, it's one thing for me to tell you about it, but it looks absolutely fantastic, and it feels just tremendous. Yeah, I mean, it's been really great. But you know, to tell you the truth, this week it turns out that one of the other products that I was considering for this, they actually came up with a new version as well. Our friends over there at Apple, what do they got going? They got this cool new. Let's get to look at the iPad, the new iPad Pro that they have. Look how great this looks, right? I mean, they got look at that small, tiny little bezel. Man, that looks outstanding. Apparently, this thing is like really thin, like about a ½ centimeter thick. That's how thin this bad boy is, and it's like a you know, it's look. I mean, they really have just really done this up really nicely. So I mean, that's another alternative that we have. I mean, and not to be outdone, here comes Google, right? Google releasing at the end of this month. They're releasing the Google Pixel Slate, which is based on the Chromebook operating system, which is quite frankly the portable computer that I am coming off of. I had a Chromebook for the last 2 or 3 years, and it's been really great. I still have it, to tell you the truth. My wife is now kind of taking it over. But really, it's been so much fun that I'm going to keep my sign-on on it and use the Chromebook when I can. Them taking the Chromebook architecture and putting it on a laptop, very attractive to me. Now, I don't know if it's going to be able to keep up with the Apples and Microsofts of the world, particularly Apple's. But man, this is like a really nice little direction they're going. This bad boy is real expensive, though. So, I mean, if you're going to spend that kind of money on something that was a Chromebook architecture, I just go ahead and buy like something from Microsoft or Apple, though. Me personally, that's how I see it. But there are some people who are going to be more than happy to pick this bad boy up when it's released. Anyway, why am I talking about all this? I'm talking about all this because the topic of the lecture today is all about new product development. Now, I want to tell you, I mean, when you think about those 3 companies and the fact that they all deal in these really high-profile tablets, the reality is what? The reality is that tablet computers are not new. Tablet computers have been around a long time. How long has the iPad been around? I mean, I'm thinking that it was first released around 2012, 2013 or something like that. That means that now it's at least 5 or 6 years old, right? Maybe it was even earlier than that. Maybe it was like 2011, so maybe 6 or 7 years old. So yeah, when we think about what new products are, the point is that we're not always talking about these brand new products that are just like breakthrough new products for the very first time. It could be a product that is new, like new to the world, like the iPad was in 2011 or 2012, Or it could be something that's new to just the marketplace. In other words, if you release a product for the very first time in a brand new market, that would represent a new product for those people as well, right? It could be something that's new with regard to the producer. In other words, if a producer goes into something and builds something that is a new product type for the very first time, that for them would be a new product. If they could be new to the seller, if a product is sold at a retail outlet or a location or a warehouse in a place that it's never been offered before, that is by itself a new product. Or it could be some kind of combination of these things. So the way that we think about things in terms of what new is with regard to new products, it could be a mishmash of a lot of things. When our bias is to think about new product in terms of, this is just something that this is brand new to the world. But the reality is that it could be new to in any way, in particular, in a particular way, to a market or to a seller or to a producer or something that's a combination of those things. They would all be regarded as new products, and because of that, they would all have very unique strategies in how they're going to be carried out. That's really the point. All right, so here are some categories of new products, and like we were talking about, right? The first is new to the world. This is something that the world has never seen before. Typically, new to the world products have some degree of cannibalism, or they have some degree of making other products that are already out there obsolete because of these brand new ways to do things for the very first time. If you ever look at a list of things the smartphone has replaced, there it is right there. 10 things the smartphone has killed, things that the smartphone has replaced. Let's see. Let's take a look here from a list of August 11th, 2018. As you know, when the smartphone was released, and we're talking about what, 11 years ago since the original iPhone came out, they've actually replaced quite a few things. And all we really need to look at is this picture right here, right? You have a guy who has all these products that he's holding that basically the iPhone has killed. We don't need to go any further than this. Right, we have this gentleman right here who is holding a huge audio device, like a radio with a tape player. He's got a big old camera, big old huge honking video camera. He's got a Walkman down there. Walkman, wow. He's got some kind of like portable computer over here. Got a Watchman, a Sony Watchman, right? So you can watch Netflix on your phone now. I mean, what the heck? Why wouldn't you? You got all these videotapes. He's got this audio equipment. Probably got a VCR over here. All these products really, in some way, they are now seem to be made obsolete, and the smartphone killed them all, right? So that's a new to the world type product that really kind of did that. It could be a new product line. Like for instance, if a company who is very, very popular comes out with a brand new product line for the very first time, then that is a form of new product by itself. An example of that, cars by Genesis. You guys know about Genesis? Let's take a look. Genesis was a offshoot of Hyundai Motors. Hyundai rhymes with Sunday, right? And what it was basically Hyundai came up with it was a couple of cars. It was the Genesis Coupe and the Genesis Sedan. And basically those cars were seen as luxury cars, but they had a tough time juxtaposing them with the Hyundai nameplate. So they had to spin those cars off and create their brand new own car line. This was fairly recently, within the last couple of years. They spun those cars off into their own car line named Genesis because they wanted to be able to let the luxury aspect of these cars kind of grow on their own without having to be held under the under the Hyundai nameplate. Now, where they didn't have to do this to create a new a new Genesis nameplate was in Hyundai's home country of South Korea, because Hyundai means a different thing there. Hyundai means this is our car brand. We don't have to worry about a luxury brand selling for the Hyundai nameplate in South Korea. They had to do it for other nations who see Hyundai in a completely different way. All right. We have new products in terms of a product line addition or an improvement or revision to existing products. Think about like how they have to release a new iPhone every year, right? Every single year there's like a small revision that makes it so perhaps the iPhone that you have is made a little bit worse off once you see the new model. But over a 5-year period of time, there's actually quite a bit difference in any any two smartphones over a 5-year period of time. From year to year, it's not a huge difference, but over a 5-year period of time, it's a massive amount of difference. Reposition products. In other words, things that we had positioned towards one particular type of customer, now we can take that same product and have to position it to a new type of customer. We'll get to that in a minute. And lastly, we have lower price products. In other words, if you have like products that are out there that are appealing to some lower price demographic or lower priced kind of customer, then that would be something that would be a form of new product. Example of that, the company Seiko. Seiko is a company that makes watches often, right? They're known for that. Their watches tend to be on the kind of pricey side. They, a good Seiko watch these days will cost you about $300 to $500, maybe $700. But they understand that Seiko watches, there's the technology that's in them. They could really cut their prices and compete with lower priced brands as well. So what they did was they created another watch brand named Pulsar. Pulsar basically are Seiko watches that are not quite on the cutting edge as Seiko watches, but they are very nice watches by themselves. And because of the fact that they have been in production a little while as Seiko watches, then they can just use the economies of scale over time and create Pulsar watches for quite a bit less money. All right, so that's the idea there. Probably they don't have too many gold watches and Pulsar watches either. All right. When it comes to repositioning product, like I had on the last page, one thing that we probably want to bring up one more time is Harley Davidson. And the reality that back in the 90s, Harley Davidson was having a problem because the people that were buying Harley Davidson motorcycles, that is to say largely baby boomer males, baby boomer males were they made Harley Davidson really grow pretty far in the 90s, the 1990s. But Harley Davidson understood even back then that there was going to be a ceiling on how far they could grow just with baby boomer males. So what they did was they started to think, how are we going to get more ladies to start riding? So what they, back then, it was ladies, but it was also like younger folks as well, people of my demographic and younger. Remember back in the 90s, I'm Generation X myself. And back in the 90s, there was a lot of consternation about how they were going to get people my age to ride more Harley Davidson motorcycles. So what did Harley Davidson do? They made it so people could pick up motorcycling a lot easier. They had to reposition their business more away from those baby boomer males and more to younger folks and more to ladies who wanted to ride. So they made it so that there was going to be training classes in motorcycles that were even easier to adopt. They made it so that people would be able to buy motorcycles a lot easier and so forth. So in the first year, Harley Davidson had more than 4,000 riders go through the program. 45% of whom were female and half were under 35. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. All right. So that's an idea of a repositioned product. All right. So some of the things that will determine whether or not a new product has success or not in the marketplace. And this is just something to think about because it speaks to culture in firms and why some firms are just a lot more innovative than other firms. So when you see this slide, just be thinking about like very innovative firms and things that they have in focus, right? The first thing is that a firm that has a lot of new product success, they typically have a very long-term commitment to development, right? In other words, if you're going to be innovative, that means the firm is always going to be innovative. It's tough to say, listen, we need to make a change, so let's be innovative for a little while to develop some new products, and then we don't have to be innovative anymore. If you're going to have a really good time having a new product success, that means that the firm is always innovating things. Now, innovation takes money. That's why very innovative firms tend to have very high price tags associated with them. Apple is a very innovative firm. Apple's products tend to be very, very expensive. My own personal opinion. Mercedes-Benz, very innovative company. Their products on the expensive side. Ferrari, same way. BMW, yup. Audi, the difference between Audi and Volkswagen. Audi is just, that's a subsidiary. One's a subsidiary of the other. But Audi is like the more experiential, more innovative company that passes technology back to VW. And because of that, Audi is a lot more expensive. But they have that long-term focus on innovation, which makes them pretty dang great. I drive an Audi, so I got to tell you, it's pretty awesome. What else? Another innovative type company. Do I have anything around here? I don't know, I think it was a little bit later. So they have to have that long-term commitment to the innovation process. Second, they have kind of have to have a company-specific approach. That is to say, that whatever the company is doing in terms of innovation, they have to find ways to make it so that only this company can do this. What the company is doing in terms of innovation, it can't be imitated by some other company, right? No other company can really be picking that up. I'll give you another innovative company. Sherwin-Williams. Sherwin-Williams, the paint company, right? They are able to do things at a very, like we know them. Like if you want to paint your house or something like that, you know you can stop by Sherwin-Williams and pick up some paint and put it in process. Did you know though that Sherwin-Williams, I mean, they have paint processes that go. They're the only folks that use the paint for painting military vessels, or when they used to shoot ships up to the in orbit, like for NASA. They would be using Sherwin-Williams paint, and because of that, those paints had to have very special formulations. So I mean, that stuff is like really, like that's really important kind of paints, and no one else can really do that. I mean, Sherwin-Williams is the company that DuPont can't do that. Sherwin-Williams is the company that does it, right? But no one else can really imitate that because they have that kind of know-how. And it relates to the third point. You have to be able to capitalize on the experiences of people who are working for your company. In other words, if you have people who have various strengths, then build the new product strategy around those strengths, right? You're going to be looking for people with those kind of strengths in the future, and then you want to build a company who is able to do this, right? If you have like a basketball team, which is full of like really talented guards who can really drive the ball real well and shoot from three, then you are not going to want to play one of those kind of games with guys like Shaquille O'Neal who want to pound the ball inside. Don't try to take the ball inside on those guys. Play the game for the talent that you have. If you get that reference, that's good. But I'm using an analogy right now. It's a sports analogy, and I told myself I was going to get away from those, but that's a pretty good one, I think. Lastly, you want to be able to establish an environment for this product, your products that you create, to be successful out there in the marketplace. Now, I don't know if you guys remember this, or if you're old enough to remember this, but today we're going to talk about Apple a lot because this is about new product development. One thing I always think about when I think about Apple's successes now is I think about how back in 2007 and around 2011, when Apple created two new innovations. The first in 2007, of course, was the iPhone. The second, around 2011 or so, was the invention of Apple Stores. Apple Stores. Now, I don't know if you remember this, but go back and look it up. The reaction of the popular press for both of those things was pretty much the same. They said for the the original iPhone, they were like, "This is the stupidest idea. Who is going to buy a stupid iPhone?" I mean, I'm not kidding you. Blogs that we now consider to be like the very vanguard of tech blogs, back then in 2007, they were just ripping on this thing. They said, "This is the dumbest idea ever. Who is going to buy this thing? Who wants to make a phone call on a screen? How long is this battery going to last? Is it going to go like a day? Who's going to buy this? No one's going to be interested in this. Who would even want to use a computer screen that small? Who would want to browse the web on something that tiny? I don't even understand this. This is stupid. Apple, you're stupid." And the same thing for the Apple Store, right? They basically said, "Why would you not want to sell Apple products at Best Buy? We got Best Buy. Hello? Why would we not want to do this?" So I don't understand why you're opening these very specific Apple stores, because I just don't understand why you would even want to do this. We got stores already. Why are you even making this? Who's going to go to this store? No one's going to go to this store. This store is stupid. Apple, you're stupid. Well, it turns out that for both factors, that we now know, of course, Apple stores are very successful, and we also know that the iPhone was very successful. But the reason why they're successful is not just because people love them. No, it's because Apple was able to successfully create an environment in which those products could be very well accepted. In the case of the iPhone, the creation of the App Store was something that, it created an entire environment so that this innovation could be really accepted. People had a brand new way to customize their App Store, their Apple experience. And for the Apple Store itself, they created a sense of culture around Apple products that before, and it's tough to recreate this at a Best Buy, but if you have an Apple store where people who are tremendous Apple fans can get together and talk to other employees of the store where they're huge fans, then those people, then what you have effectively done is created an environment in which Apple can just flourish, right? So that's what we're basically talking about here with regard to establishing an environment. All right, so let's talk about this. Now, once again here, we have an example of a funnel that is something that repeats itself again and again throughout the study of marketing. There's so many places that this funnel kind of shows up. It shows up in when it comes to consumer behavior, about consumers, how consumers make decisions about what they want to buy. It shows up in selling, where we talk about what salespeople should do in terms of prospecting. But it also shows up here with the new product development process. And basically the idea is, once again, at the very top of the funnel, you have a whole lot of possibilities, but through a process, you whittle your way down into, you whittle a lot of these possibilities out until at the very end, you have one outcome, right? So you start off with a whole lot of possibilities and you end up with one outcome. Just to kind of take you through it quickly, basically we start off with our new product strategy. In other words, the new product strategy is something that's very closely mated to the firm's mission statement, and it's very closely mated to the value statement, and probably is very closely mated as well to the objectives of the firm. So we have a new product strategy that's going to be in concert. It's going to be in support of those other things that are out there for the firm. So the way that we, are able to, like, our philosophy about building new strategy, or what our strengths are about this, and so forth. Next, we go through an idea generation phase, which is basically where we come up with ideas about what it is we should be doing, or we could create. The next phase is the idea screening phase, where basically we kind of like screen out ideas about what's possible for us to create. Idea generation is all about what we could be doing. Idea screening is about something that's feasible to be doing. The next step on the feasibility train is that next step is business analysts, right? In other words, when we do a business analysis, we figure out if this idea that we have is something that was going to make business sense. That is to say, do we have a customer base that would support this? Will we be able to make enough money off of this? Will we be able to charge enough on this? Is this something that the people who sell us our resources would be able to supply us for to make this product, and so forth, right? So we're just doing the analysis about whether or not this makes business sense. Matter of fact, that would be a good gig for some of you to, I'm sure, watching this, to kind of shoot for. If you can be a business analyst, that's always going to be a valuable position within any firm. That's a really, one of the leading indicators as to whether someone's going to make the corporate suite, is whether or not they've ever served at any time as a business analyst, because they have a very good understanding of pretty much all of the factors in every business if you have that particular job. So just be thinking about that. If you shoot for getting the job of business analyst, that's a great thing to shoot for a lot of you. Also sales, but that's another thing. The next phase after business analysis is the development. In other words, here we're going to make some kind of prototype of this product, and we're going to see if it works. After that, we're going to do a test market, where we come up with a simulation market to see if people would adopt this product, or how they feel about it, or gauge their responses to it if they were to adopt it, and so forth. Then after that, if that passes through, then we go through a form of commercialization, which is basically everything it takes to put this product on a store shelf to make it active. We're going to invoke the supply chain. We're going to actually start the process of manufacture. We're going to design packaging. We're going to design transportation for this stuff. Everything that's involved with putting this on the store shelf, that's the commercialization component. Also, we're going to make commercials, right? We're gonna send out marketing messages. We're gonna come up with some kind of pricing strategy, and so forth, right? And lastly, we have our new product. After we have this thing, from all these possibilities for things we could be doing, everything else is going to kind of wheedle its way down until we come up with the last new product development. Now, the way that you could think about this is in terms of a funnel like this. But another way to think about it would be to look at this in terms of what they often refer to as the stage gate. The stage gate process. So let's take a look. Yeah, it's a Wikipedia page right here. They refer to it as the phase gate. That's cool. Wait a minute, what the heck? I thought I was going to Wikipedia. let's back out of this. This is not cool. Wait. Phase gate process. So there we go. This article has multiple issues. There's no picture here. I like pictures. Let's go. Boom. Images. Yeah, here we go. Let's take a look at this. So basically, what we have here, you can see, can you see this? I think you can see this. So basically here we have like different steps along the way towards creating a product, right? We have the discovery stage, which we kind of discussed when we talked about like the idea generation and so forth, and the idea screening. We have scoping, which is basically business analysis. We have building the business case, which is more business analysis. We have the development, which is like creating that prototype. We have testing, which would be like creating a test market. And we have the launch, which would include commercialization and actually putting the product on the store shelves. And then at the stage after that, we actually figure out how people are actually liking this in the real world. But here's the difference in thinking about this. The stage gate model is such that between every single step along the way here, we have this screening process where we're basically asked, do we want to keep going with this or do we want to kill this idea? So before, when we were talking about like the different like way these things would funnel this way down to one idea, how that's done is at every stage along the way, there's a gate. And so after the discovery phase, there's a gate. And we basically have a team of people who are pretty high up on the food chain, high up in the hierarchy, who basically say, listen, do we want to keep on going with this or do we want to kill this idea at this point? Because remember, we're talking about creating a new product, and creating a product is expensive. I mean, depends on industry. But oftentimes, a lot of these tech products or these pharmaceutical products, they're just really expensive to develop. So yeah, I mean, so we're talking about like a lot of expense here. So at every step along the way, we give ourselves an opportunity to say, do we want to keep on going with this or do we want to kill the project? That's what we're doing. All right. All right. So we want to move on here. We want to talk about the next step, which is the idea generation. So let's talk a little bit more in depth about all these processes here that we've seen just now. So keep this in mind. Keep this slide in mind as we go through this. So when we're talking about idea generation, it's important to understand that there's a lot of ideas that we can come up with. Like for instance, where we get the ideas from, yeah, a lot of them are from the employees that work for us. A lot of them are from the customers that we have who give us feedback about the products that they're using, right? But they come from so many more places. Like for instance, it could come from the distributors that we're, that distribute our products. It could come from the competitors. When we see a competitor doing something, we're going to get that fear of missing out, because if we see them doing something, we're going to want to do that same thing. We could get ideas from vendors, people who sell us products. We could get ideas from research and development. That's R&D, where basically, we understand things that what's possible from them. They don't know so much about what's wanted, but they know a lot about what's possible. And lastly, we can learn from consultants, people who work for this company. With this company, but not necessarily for this company. That's a consultant. I used to be a consultant for many years, by the way. All right, so a few tips for doing really hot new product development, and this is as of very late, and we're talking about like things that really innovative firms do well. The first thing is to disperse research and development around the globe. In other words, different things that folks research and develop. The globe is just like any place else where there's different levels of expertise at different locations because of a variety of cultural and opportunistic factors that create those opportunities in other places. So if you're going to be like really good at development, then you're going to disperse your research and development all around the globe. Second, you're going to keep these teams kind of small and empower the employees. In other words, if you're going to do really good new product development, you're going to make it so that there's not a whole lot of people working on a team. Too many cooks spoil the broth, as they say, right? So you're going to keep these teams kind of small and make it so that these people feel like whatever input they are thinking about giving, that they feel like they can give it. One reason that you can do that is because the hierarchy in a lot of these firms are flattened. What do we mean by that? In really bureaucratic type firms, if you know this, if you've studied management, in very bureaucratic type firms, the hierarchy within the company is very tall. That is to say, at the very top of it, they have a CEO. followed by maybe like a CMO or a CFO or a COO at the next level. Then you have a whole bunch of VPs doing various stuff. And then at the level below that, you got a whole bunch of supervisors. You got a whole, well, I'm sorry, you have a whole bunch of middle managers, and then you have a whole bunch of supervisors, and then you have a whole bunch of assistant directors or something like that. And then there's these people who are actually doing the work at the bottom, and there's a whole bunch of them. In flattened hierarchy organizations, typically you have a leader, you have a couple of people that respond to that leader, and then after that, you have a whole lot of people who have equal power. And because they have that equal power, they feel like they can contribute more. In a very high level of bureaucracy, people at the bottom think that they shouldn't be saying so much. Heck, in bureaucratic organizations, people at the top feel like they shouldn't be saying so much because they don't want to overstep their bounds. So yeah, in flattened kind of hierarchies, the people feel like they can contribute more, and they won't be judged for that because they have to do more jobs effectively, and they have an equal degree of power. All right, so the next thing is we want to be able to encourage the generation of crazy new ideas. If you're going to be really innovative, you have to be able to accept really off-the-wall ideas, because to be innovative means you have to think about how you're going to make those crazy ideas work, or if you can at all, right? So, there was a link to the company IDEO. IDEO is a famous company for being innovative, by the way, but basically they're a design company. They have all sorts of great ideas, like the Levi's commuter trucker jacket, or like the idea of trust with machine learning and stuff like that. They've been like innovative for years and years. If you want to go on YouTube, check out a 60 minutes interview with people from IDEO, and that had to have been 20, 25 years ago, but it's still relevant in terms of how that company is. Now, IDEO, they are a company who basically they encourage a lot of crazy new ideas, and they just want to bounce them around and see if they can make them work. They do it through a process called brainstorming. If you ever take a professional selling class or a sales principles class with me, then we're going to talk a lot about brainstorming and why that's important. And the last thing is that if you're going to make brainstorming work and then have those crazy ideas, you have to be able to accept that mistakes are something that's going to be a part of this, and you just have to welcome them, because mistakes are really an opportunity for learning. A lot of these companies that are not innovative, they do not accept these mistakes as well. They're not easy with those. Really innovative companies, they understand that these things are going to be something that's a part of the process. You want to know a really innovative company? Google. Google is a really innovative company. I've been in, all you guys are buying your iPhones. I've been buying Android phones for years and years. And I love them because, well, frankly, you're always getting new stuff. I mean, there's new stuff all the time when you get used to Android. Android used to be a really ratty, kind of a system. Now I think it's the best operating system because of the fact that, there's always like innovation going on, and I really enjoy that. Now, the thing that you have to get used to when you use an Android phone, a Google phone, is that things that you use to be able to do jobs, Google will take it away at the drop of a hat and replace it with something new. Your data will stay around, but the reality is that if you're going to be with an innovative type company, you have to learn to roll with the punches about when they say, okay, this thing is a mistake now, let's replace it with this thing. And you just have to say, oh, I accept that, right? There's no sense of like just staying with things with Google. They're always going to have something new out there. It can be frustrating, but it's always typically better. All right, so good. Yeah, we talked about brainstorming just now, so I don't feel like I need to go through this again, but basically that's the process of getting a group to think of unlimited ways to vary a product or solve a problem. Idea screening is that next step, the first filter in the development process, which eliminates ideas that are inconsistent with the organization's new product strategy or inappropriate. Concept testing is a way to evaluate a new product idea, which is something that you do in idea screening, by the way, before any prototype has been created. In other words, you test the idea of something before you actually create a product for it. Like, for instance, when back in 2006 and 5, if Apple was doing concept testing on the phone, iPhone, what they would have done is they would have asked people, hey, would you be willing to use a phone with a screen on it, because and use the screen as a touch device? That was something, it's easy for us to forget now, but there had never been anything like that before. I mean, there had been a few very small computers, but it would be something that was really hard to use. Apple saying, listen, would you accept a phone that would do a lot of jobs for you, that you could use a touchscreen for input in terms of like making phone calls and stuff like that, or texting? And so people just had to be hip to that concept. I bet you people actually, if they did concept testing, they probably hated the idea until they got it in their hands. So that's an important thing to remember about concept testing. Sometimes people, even when you tell them about the concept, they will say, this is going to be something I hate. I suspect, by the way, I suspect that when I read about people's responses to self-driving cars right now, that's a case where people cannot envision what it's going to be like from the concept test, right? People hear self-driving cars and they're thinking, oh, someone's going to hack my car, I'm going to crash it. Oh man, it's going to be so terrible. Oh, I already know how to drive. Why do I need to have a robot drive the car for me? Are you kidding me? Are you freaking kidding me right now? I cannot wait for a self-driving car. Are you serious? A self-driving car? I cannot wait for this. It's gonna be so much safer, I think. And you tell me I can like decide on a weekend to drive over to Detroit and I don't have to drive it for real? I could just sit there. Matter of fact, you think about it, I don't really have to own a car. If I have self-driving cars, hey, it'll be Uber all the time. I'll just take a car and take it wherever I want. I don't have to own anything. It's gonna be sweet. Sweet. But that's a problem. I mean, the problem is that the concept test, people don't like the idea of the concept, but they haven't seen the product actually. So that's my thing. Send your hate mail to joecage@gmail.com. Hate mail, joecage@gmail.com. All right. The next phase is that business analysis phase. I keep on saying analyst. That's the job. The job title would be a business analyst. The job they do is business analysis. All right. So big things that they would consider would be how much demand there is for this stuff, the cost of this thing, how much they could make in sales, and how much profit they would create. So these are things we've already talked about. Also, they would consider other factors as well, but these are the four main things. Development, creating prototypes, doing, figuring out what the packaging might look like, look at any kind of final government appeals and stuff like that, promotion, price, and distribution strategy. So this is a new thing that's out there, this idea of simultaneous product development, which is basically we want to be able to develop these different stages at the same time. So it takes a lot of like integration with other parties outside the organization. I'm not going to ask you a quiz question about this, but understand that this is a thing that's going on now. In other words, these steps that we had before in terms of the new product development process, we do it more at the same time now. We kind of integrate it. We're able to develop products a lot faster. Matter of fact, this is something that's the Japanese automakers have become kind of famous for. This idea of like speeding up the production process by doing more of this stuff all at the same time. Test marketing, when we do this stuff, we want to be able to test what this stuff actually looks like. An industry that's really famous for test marketing turns out to be the fast food industry. Fast food. Typically when they come out with new products, they always want to test in like cities like Columbus, Ohio, Terre Haute, Indiana. I think another one is the greater Milwaukee area. And the reason why they want to test in those places is because those cities, they look very much like America looks. And so when they choose those places to be a test market, they're actually saying, listen, how's America going to respond to this? And they can look at a lot of like responses because while it's a big area, it allows for them to be able to get a lot of responses and to figure out how people are going to react to this stuff when it gets released to the wide market. It's important to understand, however, that test marketing is kind of going away because of the reality that data is so doggone prevalent now. The fact is that that data is so easy to get that a lot of companies will basically forego test marketing and just do a detailed data analysis about things that have been going on in the marketplace and call that their test market. So something to think about. Commercialization, all this stuff is involved with putting stuff on the store shelves. There's the production, there's the inventory buildup, distributing shipments around. That's all a big part of it as well. Also doing sales training. If this is going to be B2B, that's really important. Remember, business to business, it's important to have salespeople understand that they are responsible for the diffusion of that innovation. What is diffusion of innovation? What is diffusion of innovation, you may ask? You just stay tuned in this lecture and we will talk about it. Customer advertising, distribution shipments, all this stuff is important to commercialization. Now, why do some products fail? It's important to have a discussion about that, I think, to discuss why some products succeed and others fail. Well, some things to think about is that when products fail, typically, it's due to that very first bullet point right there. no one could really figure out what the benefit of that product would be, right? In other words, they couldn't figure out why this product is differentiable to anything else that they could be buying. And if they're trying to make it as a new product and you don't really have any kind of point of benefit, then that's a tough ask for the consumer to be able to pick up on that. Also, there can also be a kind of like a bad match between the features that you offer and what the customer is actually looking for. A lot of times the companies will make something, but they haven't really made much consideration about how many people would be actually desiring that particular product. So they overestimate the marketing size and the market size. They think that the more people are going to buy this thing than are actually even possible to buy this thing. Bad pricing, bad positioning, bad distribution, bad promotion, bad product. All right, good. What are some successful factors in new products? If they're successful, that means that there's going to be a good match between what the market is looking for and what the product offers, right? So there's a lot of research that's involved, marketing research that's involved with doing this. In other words, having to understand what the market needs and how you can actually directly meet that need. That's a critical thing. Next, we have how it's different from substitute products, and it's going to be a benefit to a large number of people. So that's a big success factor, is that you're able to appeal to a lot of people with these things, right? Good. Let's move on a little bit. So let's talk about that diffusion stuff, because that's important, and we want to kind of get into that, right? What is diffusion of innovation? Basically, what we're talking about is the process by which the adoption of an innovation kind of spreads out. Like, for instance, when you create a new product, how is it that people typically pick that up in the marketplace? How is it that they do that? That's important, right? It's important to be thinking about that. Like, here is largely the categories of adopters that are out there. And so this is kind of an important thing to consider about who these people are that are going to typically pick up a product. So let's talk a little bit about innovators first. Hang on a minute. All right. Innovators. I keep on talking about Apple today, but let's talk about them one more time. You know that, especially early on in the iPhone era, there would be, every time that Apple would release a product, a lot of people would be interested in it, but there would be a few people that would be willing to camp out there in front of the iPhone store for like a couple of days before that phone was released. You know them and I know them, right? Or there will be someone who is like really into like buying some kind of brand new product that's breaking, and not a lot of people even know about it, but it's like out there before anybody else like has this, even knows this is a product option, but they will be the very first people to buy it, right? All right, so these folks are what we refer to as innovators. And innovators are people who are like very geeky. By geeky, I mean that they know a lot of things about a particular industry choice out there. They know a lot of things about these brand new products on the marketplace. They understand these things are coming out way before anybody else does. They just really understand this stuff. And so because of that, they are willing to pay a price premium for new products. Now, you understand, we haven't studied pricing yet in this class, but you understand probably as well as I do that a lot of strategy for like especially technologically oriented firms is that when products are new, they will charge a high price for those products, and the longer we go, they will bring the price down, right? They will bring the price down over time to be able to catch more people as their production process improves and as their economies of scale improves. They can bring the price down, and that's a good thing because they can catch more people. Now, innovators, it turns out, the innovators are only really responsible for about 2.5% of, let me say that again. Innovators are pretty much 2.5% of all the people that end up adopting a product. So we're talking about like something that is like a very small percentage of the overall number of people. There are not that many innovators out there. And remember, these are people who, as soon as this thing is available for purchase, they'll be out there to buy it. I mean, they're going to buy it early on. Now, it turns out that innovators do not have a lot of pull with the other types of adopters. But you know who does have a lot of pull? Are these next group of people, these early adopters up here, right? Now, the early adopters, if you guys were to read a lot of literature that professors write when they do research about new product development, one thing that you will become very apparent to you is that what firms ought to be looking for is different ways to attract those early adopters and get them to buy, right? That's what they ought to be looking for. So early adopters, it turns out, they are the kind of people who have a lot of, like, they typically are like leaders in the community. Like they are probably like they're probably president of the block club. They got like 4,000 friends on Facebook. They are probably on the school board as a, they're some, one of those kind of folks, right? They are, uh, Rotary Club type folks. They are Optimist Club type folks. They are on the Dale Carnegie. They teach a Dale Carnegie class in their spare time. That kind of stuff. You know what I'm saying? So basically, why are they important? Why are early adopters important? Well, just for those reasons, right? Not only are they going to be amongst the first people to buy something, but they have so much social pull in their community that they're going to be able to get other people to buy it. So early adopters are the kind of people that were like, they're savvy enough to kind of pick up what innovators are doing because they have good relationships with innovators. But because the early adopter picked it up, all the other types are going to be picking it up as well. Early adopters, about 16% of the overall people who are going to end up adopting a product. So that's 16%, right? Next is the early majority and then the late majority. So the early majority are basically folks who are shoppers, right? In other words, by the time that the early majority of people start to pick it up, adopt a product, they're going to be like, it's going to be a brand new type of product. There's probably in the industry, there's going to be a lot of alternatives by that time because a lot of companies have already started to jump in there realizing that this was a growing industry. So there's a lot of people to kind of choose from, and you will like start to think about like, there's a lot of things to pick from. It's still a new technology, so the early majority is going to do a lot of shopping. They're going to compare brands, they're going to compare attributes and compare features and compare benefits and so forth. And they're just going to really go a long way towards like, figuring out what's the best for them. Another thing they may be thinking about is, well, no, that's more the late majority. The late majority, when they buy things, they're typically buying because like people that they have known already have this thing. So there's what they refer to as a network externality effect. Network externalities is basically you're buying something because somebody in your network already has this same thing, and you want to be able to get this to work with them. Video games are an example of that. Like for instance, a lot of people will buy a Sony over a Microsoft because their friends have Sony stuff, right? That's an example of that anyway. So that's the late majority, right? Late majority are people who are, they're buying, but they're buying off the pressure of somebody else. Laggards are the last, by the way, the early majority and the late majority, about 33, 34% of all people each are in that early and late majority. So we're talking about maybe 66%, maybe 2/3 of all the people that end up adopting a product are right here in the early and late majority, right? They're right there. So we're talking about the great majority of people. The last folks are the laggards, right? My grandfather just passed away this summer. He was 96 years old, but he was a world famous laggard when it comes to making like buying technology products. Like he would buy technology way after it had been introduced. I think he bought his first answering machine like 93. I think he bought a fax machine in 2002. One of those guys. And the reason that he bought it so late was that he knew that at that point the price, everybody else has been using this thing. It's a tried and true thing. I can get it for real cheap, right? He had a lot of money, but he liked to get things real cheap. That's the kind of guy he was. If you wanted to buy right now a top of the line DVD player, could you do it? Yeah, at one time in my, I can remember 95, 96, if you bought a DVD player, it represented a significant financial investment for you. Now, today, if you want to buy a DVD player, you can go buy Checkers, and as you pick up your burger from Checkers, maybe just ask them if they got any DVD players that you can buy just like as a throw-in. They're so cheap now. I mean, the DVD players are like really inexpensive. So, again, that's the benefit of being a laggard. You're going to get this technology way after everybody else, but you're not going to spend a whole lot of money, and that's the appeal of the laggard, right? It's like you're saying, I never really needed this thing in the first place, so I may as well not spend any money on it, really, any significant amount of money on it. That's the idea. All right. So a few things that will affect the ability to actually adopt a product or not is going to be these 5 factors right here. The first is the degree of complexity. I'm sure I'm not telling you. less complex products have an easier time being adopted than more complex products, right? This is why I think that the iPhone really came out ahead of other smartphones or other phones at the time, was because the iPhone was just so dang easy to use. I mean, there were my daughter at the time, she was 4. She could use an iPhone, like, and it had just been released, so I knew it was going to be a huge hit because it just was not very complex. Compatibility is another factor, right? Whether or not something's going to be compatible with the stuff you already use. If it's more compatible, then it's going to be easier to be adopted by the marketplace. The next is the relative advantage. In other words, if this thing is actually kind of like better than what the alternatives are that are out there, then that shows that it has some kind of relative advantage to something else that you could be buying to solve this problem. So that's going to make it more adoptable. The last two things are things I want to talk about. The first is this degree of observability. In other words, if you can actually observe someone using this thing before you buy it, if you can observe and see how it kind of works, then that's going to help with adoption rate, right? Like, for instance, consider the fact that video game sales are still doing pretty well, even though people are outright playing video games on YouTube now, right? You would think that if someone could play a game on YouTube, it would hurt the ability to sell that game. Turns out they figured out that degree of observability, actually people love that. They want to see someone else playing it before they decide to pay money on a video game. It's an interesting phenomenon, is it not? But that speaks to the idea of observability. I need to see someone else using something before I decide whether or not I want to pick it up myself. The second is trialability. That is to say, if I want to be able to try it myself before I see if it's for me. I want to try this thing myself. Now, that was an early criticism of Amazon.com when they went away from selling books and went towards selling more, more mainstream items. People would complain, especially people who knew a lot about marketing and new product development. They would complain that, hey, there's no way to do this observability or trialability on Amazon. So it turns out that people did have that problem, but they also loved shopping on Amazon because it was so dang convenient. So what did they do? I'll tell you what they did. A colleague of mine back in grad school, oh wait, no, it was the last job I had. He actually did some research on this. What he called it was this phenomenon of showrooming. Showrooming. And I'm sure that, if you haven't done showrooming, then you know someone who has. Showrooming is basically where you go to a brick and mortar store like Target or Walmart or something like that and look for the product that you want to buy, and you hold it in your hands and you try it out. And once you try it out and make sure it's to your liking, then you take your smartphone and you buy it on Amazon. You don't buy it at the store you're at, right? That's showrooming. And there's all sorts of things that companies are going to be trying to see if they can stop showrooming, because that just drives stores nuts. But that's the phenomenon that folks are doing now. So that's the idea. Let's move on. Oh, by the way, I wanted to show you this. Now, if you've studied statistics at all, you know about the gamma distribution. That is to say, the normal distribution. And so the reason I was giving you these percentages of how many people were in each category of adopter type is because we understand about the standard deviation, right? So basically, under this normal distribution, one standard deviation away from the mean, which is right here in the middle of this standard deviation, one standard deviation, that is your early and late majority, right? So that's, that one standard deviation, if you remember your statistics well, that one standard deviation represents about 34% of the population. So both sides here, they represent 68% of the population or so, right? Two standard deviations represents about between 2 and 3% of the population, represents about 13.5%. So you can see it right here. And more than 3 standard deviations away represents about 2.5. 1 and 2, 2 and 3. Yeah, this represents about more than 3 standard deviations away, represents about 2.5% of the overall population. So we're talking about area under the curve here, right? So, here, areas under the curve represents about 66% of the entire data set. Here, right here, under the curve, represents about 13.5%, and over here represents about 2.5%. The laggards are 2 standard deviations and above. outright. So this represents about 16% of the overall population of people who end up adopting a product. All right. Now, the next thing I want to talk to you about is this idea of the product life cycle. Now, I don't know how many of you have kids, or I don't know how many of you used to be a kid, but I think that a parent would appreciate this. In every kid's life, when you're a parent, you understand that there are various levels of danger that your kid is faced with as they grow up, and as they're younger, they're faced with more. Let me start this again. If you're sitting right now and you're watching this video and you are a college student and you are roughly 20 years old, not to say that you are, but if you are this person, understand that what it took for your guardians or parents to get you to this moment represented quite a bit of risk. First of all, there was this period before you were even born, where they were spending a lot of money on you. They were putting together cribs. They were baby proofing their house. They were buying all sorts of clothes before you were even born. So there was a lot of cost involved with your life before you even made the scene on this planet, right? And then once you were born, from about 0 to 2 years old, yeah, I mean, you were a cute baby. I'm sure you were, but it was pretty touch and go with you. I mean, with a baby, as cute as they are, we tend to forget, or maybe we don't forget, that everything about them is vulnerable. I mean, any little thing that can go wrong, if they're sleeping funny, if they're sleeping in the wrong position, if they crawl in the wrong place, if they get in the wrong position, if they were born a little bit sick, everything with them is dangerous. So they take a lot of maintenance by the parents to make sure that these babies don't, well, frankly, everything is a very, very big danger. So you don't want anything tragic to happen to the baby. So it takes a lot of maintenance to get into a position. From 2 years old, when a baby turns 2, there's a big celebration by the parents because, hey, that period is over. I mean, there's not that imminent sense of danger here that's always around. But from about 2 years old to maybe 10 years old, it takes a lot of thought to keep that baby in top shape then too, right? I mean, after 2 years old, babies start making friends, and the friends kind of compete with each other, and there's always little issues with babies trying to compete. And some of these friends, they stay friends for a while. Some of them kind of drop off the scene for a while. You have to kind of navigate that stuff. It's really important. So that's a lot of concern as well. From 10 to 18, yeah, the babies can pretty much make their own decisions pretty well by that point. But hey, you got to still kind of monitor them a little bit to make sure that they don't mess up too much. And then you are like you are right now. You're the mature adult that you are, and I'm sure that you have nothing but starry skies and sunny days ahead of you as you make your fully mature adult decisions now that you have achieved the rich old age of 18 years old. Now, why am I telling you this little allegory? Because I'm trying to relate it to how products are when products are first conceived of and then born and then have to deal with things on the early levels of their life. What we're talking about here is the product life cycle, right? And that basically is the concept that provides a way to try to trace the stages from when a product is first released, from its introduction to its eventual decline and maybe even death, if that if, for instance, some products are no longer used anymore, like I haven't seen where you can buy a VCR anymore. I think the last company that was making VCRs has gone out of business, for instance, right? So that's a consideration. All right, so here is basically the product life cycle. Now, these are the 4 stages: the introductory stage, the growth stage, the maturity stage, and the decline stage. Now, what we're seeing here is basically the purple line is in terms of the overall number of sales, right? How many sales they've made. The red line here is how much they have made in profits. Don't forget, profits equals revenue minus costs, right? So, I mean, at some point you have to think about, in terms of profits, what we're talking about is the total amount of sales minus how much costs it took for the firm to be able to stay in business, right? So in the introductory stage, you can see here that the sales start at 0. There's been before a product is released, there's been no revenue made on that product whatsoever. Now the profits start below 0, and you wonder, why are the profits below 0? And that's a good question. I'll give you a second to think about it. Yeah, that's a good thought. But let me tell you why really the line is below 0. The thought is that it takes a lot of money. Once again, before you release a product, there was a lot of investment in that product. There was all these development costs, there was all these search costs, there was all these test marketing costs, there was all, if you had to have government compliance, there's a crap load of costs with that. It costs a lot to develop a product. So by the time you actually introduce a product to the world for purchase, there's a certain amount of costs that go along with that, right? So you introduce this thing, and throughout the introductory stage, you're typically talking about like products that that you're making sales here. Now, the minute that you go from going from zero, from negative in the introductory stage and going across the break of zero in terms of profits, then you are introduced into the growth stage. Now, the growth stage, we'll talk about what the nuances are within these stages in a moment. But basically, the growth stage is the stage in which the firm is really starting to kind of like come into its own. But there's a lot of competition that comes into the fray here as well. So the idea here is in terms of sales, sales will be growing here. You can see if you've taken calculus, then you know that this, for the most part, through this growth stage, the growth here is kind of concave up. In other words, the sales are growing at an increasing rate, right? But at some point here, it goes from being concave up to concave down. That is to say, it's growing at an increasing rate, and then at some point it starts growing at a decreasing rate, right? So at some point here, we start to kind of like, there's a maturity stage that kind of kicks in, and it starts to kind of like, starts to go for a while until the products become clearly in some kind of decline. Perhaps some other product has come out there that kind of competes with it, or perhaps people just, people's preferences have changed, so they don't really like this stuff anymore. There's a decline here after a while, and the decline can last for a very, very long time. Like for instance, Coca-Cola has been in about 100-year decline, right? But they're still around because they still make millions and millions and millions of dollars. So there's decline goes until we no longer can make profit, right? In other words, at the moment that the profits go to zero, we just kill the brand. That's the theory here, right? So it's important to understand that even though we just looked at this, there's a lot of things to think about in terms of like how the product life cycle typically really looks. Like for instance, for style, the style will, it will take off, and then what do we see here? Over time, there's a bounce effect. Typically, this is about 30 years. At a 30-year clip of time, then we will see that this thing comes in fashion, kind of goes away, but then it kind of comes back, right? So that for a particular fashion, we can see there's only one time, but for a style, these styles typically have a bounce effect. And for a fad, you can see that these things kind of like run up real fast and then they go away real fast. Like those things that the kids were playing with just a couple of years ago. Spinning toys, those spinning toys, like fidget spinners. Fidget spinners, like they went away, for a second they were everywhere, and then they went away. So that the product life cycle was real quick for that. All right, so something to think about in terms of like, whether or not something is in decline or growth or introductory phase. And this is back during a slice of period of time between 1999 and 2004. Non-digital TVs were in clear decline. Digital TVs had been introduced, but they had started to grow at a decreasing rate because of the introduction in 1999 of flat panel TVs, which really just kind of broke in 2002, 2003. All right, so you can kind of see it right here. All right, so let's talk about things that happen in these four stages, right? First of all, the introductory stage. Number one, the thing you have to understand about the introductory stage is that it can be like snuffed out right here, right? There's a very high degree of failure rates because a lot of people just won't adopt a product early on. So I have, my understanding is that every single in an average supermarket, there's something like 15,000 new products every single year, and like 13,000, 14,000 of them don't even make it. I mean, they just don't make it. So it's something to remember about like failure rates. There's little competition. In other words, before a product is really proven, there's not going to be a whole lot of willingness by other companies to kind of like jump in there to make a competing product. There's going to be a lot of frequent product modification because remember, we're early on here, And because of that, it's not going to be perfect. And so companies are going to want to always tweak what they have in terms of modification. Now think about this, how they do this in terms of tech products, right? They will always come out with like software updates or things like that. That would be the format of the frequent product modification. All right. Limited distribution. In other words, we don't have the money to really like have this stuff be everywhere, so we have to probably keep it kind of exclusive. High marketing and production costs, negative profits with slow sales increases. Remember that whole introductory stage was full of negative profits. When you see advertising for stuff at the introductory stage, typically the promotion will just focus on how much awareness, just trying to build awareness of this thing and give people information about it. So that's one of the general ways that we do it. And the communication challenge is to kind of stimulate primary demand. That next phase, the growth phase. Here there's an increasing rate of sales. Sales are increasing at an increasing rate. And the entrance of competitors, in other words, once competitors start seeing that these sales are really growing fast, there's going to be a lot more companies that are just willing to kind of dive in there, right? There's a lot of market consolidation at the same time. That is to say, market consolidation is a good way of saying companies are going out of business, right? In other words, because of the reality that like companies are, getting in there, trying to get their feet in the water. Excuse me, sorry about that. I got the hiccups. They're trying to get their feet in the water. A lot of them are going to just like not last too long. There's going to be a lot of really initial healthy profits. Aggressive advertising on the difference between brands. In other words, companies are trying to like really differentiate themselves through advertisements. And there's going to be a lot wider distribution because they have to, because they want to be able to stay competitive. I was showing the live class, like car brands that have gone out of business. And I don't know if you guys have ever thought about this, but when you think about like how many car brands in the history of the United States automobile market do you think are no longer with us? I don't know if you've ever thought about this. I was thinking maybe there had to have been 20 car brands that have no longer, have now ceased to exist. Turns out I was born too late to really understand just how many car brands there have been in the United States. Check this out. What we're looking at here are pretty much all of the ones that start with A, right? Let me take myself away from this for a second so you can really see this. This is a Wikipedia ad. We're looking at like car brands, like for instance, Abbott Detroit. Never heard of them. They were around from 1909 to 1916. American Autos. There was like 6 different companies that were just named American Autos. 1911, 1899, 1906 to 1914, 1911 to 1912, stuff like that. They also have the Apollo Automotor. Here we have the B's, which include the Boisolot, around from 1901, Bertollet, going from 1908 to 1910, Chicago Electric, Colt, Coyote Special. These are the C's. Here's the D's. You see what I'm going at here? We're talking about a whole lot of companies from a time period that would represent for the auto industry the growth phase. But there were so many companies that are no longer with us. I mean, we think we have a lot of companies that are selling cars now. Look at all these companies who have come and gone in that particular period of time, right? We're talking about a lot. They even have General Motors Corporation from 1908 to 2009. Oh, that is a slam right there. But let's continue. General Electric. Did you know they made cars? I myself did not. Griswold. What else we got? Hummer. Remember them? Remember the Hupmobile? I don't. Let's see. We got the I's, the J's. This is pretty interesting, yeah? Kansas City Motors. Never heard of them. That's interesting, though. Kalamazoo Motors. Never heard of them. Knickerbocker Motors. Never heard of them. Liquid Air Motors. That sounds like a really fine mattress, but no, it's a car. Maryland Steamer. Sounds disgusting, but it was a car. What else we got? Niagara Motors. I'm sure they made them around Buffalo. Yep, Wilson, New York. Nuclea Motors from 1959 to 1960. Made in Lansing, Michigan, where I went to grad school. Whoop, whoop. Pontiac Motors. Yep, no longer around. Started in Pontiac, Michigan. REO, which stands for Olds, right? That was the original guy who started Oldsmobile. That was his initials, REO. I remember that. Lansing, Michigan. One more time, REO. If you find, by the way, if you find an REO that's in someone's garage, buy it. I'm not even kidding you. Buy one of those bad boys. Here's the S's. There's a lot of them. Here's the T's. A lot of them. U's. A lot of them. V's. Yup. W's. A lot of them. In even Z's, there was the Zent, the Zentmobile, the Zimmerman, and the Zip. So you can see that these time periods that these companies have gone out of business, it represents the growth phase for this stuff. And you can see that a lot of companies just dropped out, right? The maturity phase. Like here, the sales are increasing at a decreasing rate, and they do for a while, but after a while, the sales like plateau, and they start to go down. There's a lot of saturated markets. Because it's maturity, there's a lot of annual models start to appear. There's a lot of lengthened product lines. In other words, they want to sell people a lot of different iterations of the same thing. How they differentiate themselves is going to be through service and repair, because that's really important to people in a mature market. There's going to be a lot of heavy promotions. A lot of marginal competitors kind of drop out here, and the niche markets kind of emerge. In other words, people will create markets for people who don't represent the mass market, but have very specific needs in terms of a niche market, a smaller niche market. And the last phase is that decline stage. In the decline stage, there's going to be a long run drop in sales. There's going to be a lot more unsold items. There's going to be a lot more organized abandonment. And in the minute we stop making a profit here, we're going to stop making the item. All right. So once again, here is our product life cycle curve, and you can see that this kind of like it shows that there's a lot of concurrence with when people are going to end up buying something. You can see here that the innovators, the early adopters, and the early majority, they typically will buy through the introduction and growth phase. The maturity and decline phase will typically be handled by the late majority and the laggards of the adoption curve. All right, the diffusion curve. Okay, I think this is all I want to talk about today. This has been an hour of nothing but straight me. I'm going to put a homework assignment out there. It's going to be pretty straightforward and simple, but so look for that perhaps on the discussion boards. Don't let me go through the weekend without doing this. And I'm sorry for the late lecture this week. I don't really like doing this, but yeah, I told you about my issues with the Surface. So sorry about that. My bad this week. Oh, you don't see me. Sorry about the late lecture. My bad on that. But again, by next week, I'm going to have this bad boy working. It's going to be so awesome. And so look for more better video for one thing. That's going to be out there. Okay. All right. You guys have a great weekend, and I will see you next week. See you then. Bye bye now.